Hello, guys. Welcome you all to the Insights into Books podcast. Before we start, kindly follow or subscribe us. And if you want daily summary files of these books, then subscribe us on Gumroad. Links are in description. Now, let's start today's discussion, guys. So today we're launching a deep dive into some really fascinating research. It challenges a lot of what we think we know about strength, about success, even connection.
That's right.
For decades, vulnerability has been seen as this liability, something to hide, especially at work, maybe even personally.
Definitely. A weakness.
Exactly. But the work we're looking at today, it's built on, 12 years of research, and it argues the complete opposite, that vulnerability is actually the best measure of our courage.
It flips the script entirely.
So our mission today is really to get under the skin of that idea. How does embracing this kind of courage actually change how we live, how we love, parenting, even how we lead?
Absolutely. That's the core mission, isn't it? To reframe vulnerability. We want to move it away from just being about fear or weakness and understand it as a fundamental part of courage.
Okay.
We're going to unpack these really profound insights that show vulnerability isn't something to be avoided, but it's actually the birthplace of, pretty much everything that matters. Joy, connection, creativity.
The good stuff.
All the good stuff. And crucially, we'll explore this path to what the research calls wholehearted living. And, this isn't about being perfect.
Right.
Far from it.
Right.
It's about cultivating this deep internal sense of worthiness, that core belief that I'm enough, even when, let's face it, the world is constantly telling us we need to prove ourselves.
Okay, so let's start there. If we're going to redefine vulnerability, we need a really solid definition, something more than just, being sensitive or emotional. What's the technical definition here?
Yeah, the precision is it's really important. So vulnerability isn't defined as an emotion itself. It's defined as the experience of three specific things happening at once.
Okay.
Uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure.
Yeah.
It's that feeling you get when you're facing all three of those simultaneously.
Uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure.
Exactly. And framing it technically like that is super helpful because it separates the act of being vulnerable from the feeling of, say, fear or weakness.
Yeah.
They aren't the same thing.
That makes sense. It sort of sets the stage for, everything, doesn't it? If you think about any big life event, starting a business, like you said, falling in love.
Yeah, or even smaller things.
Right, like giving honest feedback in a meeting. All three are there. You don't know the outcome. That's the uncertainty. You might lose face or the relationship might change. There's the risk.
Yeah.
And you might feel embarrassed or hurt the emotional exposure.
Precisely. And that connection is why this research argues that vulnerability is actually the core of all our emotions and feelings.
All of them. Even joy.
Think about it. To feel joy is vulnerable, isn't it? Because you risk that joy ending or being taken away. To love someone, that's perhaps the ultimate vulnerability because you risk loss or heartbreak.
Okay, I see that.
Even feeling grief is fundamentally about being vulnerable to the pain of loss. So if you try to foreclose on your emotional life, build walls to avoid uncertainty, risk, and exposure, what you're actually doing is walking away from the very things that give life meaning. Passion, purpose, connection. They all require vulnerability.
But it still feels counterintuitive that something feeling so, frankly, terrifying is the birthplace of all the good stuff, like love, belonging, creativity, empathy. How does that work?
Well, it works because you simply can't have those positive experiences without opening yourself up to the possibility of the negative. They require that leap, that willingness to risk.
So no risk, no reward.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
Historically, especially in leadership, we've valued stoicism, emotional control, projecting this image of always being invulnerable. That was seen as strength.
Right. The strong, silent type.
Exactly. But this research completely flips that. It says, no, vulnerability is actually courage beyond measure. True courage isn't avoiding the uncertainty. It's choosing to walk into it, knowing the risks, knowing the potential for emotional exposure, and deciding to show up anyway.
So the courage is in the showing up despite the fear.
That's it. That willingness to step into the arena, as we'll discuss later, that's the courage we're talking about.
Okay. So to really embrace that, we need to tackle some of the myths that, hold us back. The first big one seems to be this idea that vulnerability is a choice. Like we can just decide not to be vulnerable if we're tough enough.
Yeah. That's a really comforting myth, isn't it? But it's just a myth. The reality is vulnerability is a fundamental part of being human. It's not optional equipment.
You can't opt out.
You really can't.
Okay.
As long as you're alive and interacting with the world, you're going to encounter uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. It's unavoidable. We try to opt out, of course. We try to control everything, predict the future, perfect ourselves.
But doesn't work.
Ultimately, no. Those strategies fail, or they create other problems. So the only choice we actually have isn't whether to be vulnerable, but how we respond when we inevitably face it. Do we shut down, armor up, pretend it's not happening, or do we lean in, engage with courage?
Choosing to pretend just leads to other issues, right? Like the numbing or perfectionism you mentioned.
Exactly. Behaviors that often go against who we really want to be.
Okay, so myth 1 busted. Not a choice. What about myth 2? This is the one I think scares people the most, that being vulnerable means just, like, letting it all hang out, oversharing, TMI.
Right. The vulnerability is verbal diarrhea myth,
Okay.
and that's completely wrong. It's the opposite of what healthy vulnerability looks like.
So it's not about spilling your guts to everyone you meet.
Absolutely not. True. Sustainable vulnerability requires two crucial things: boundaries and trust. If you just dump all your emotional baggage onto someone who hasn't earned the right to hear it, or if you share deeply personal stuff inappropriately, say in a work context, that's not vulnerability.
What is it then?
Often it's a misguided, maybe even desperate attempt to hotwire connection. Or sometimes it's just poor boundaries. And frankly, it often comes across as weakness or attention-seeking precisely because it lacks boundaries and discernment.
So healthy vulnerability is more strategic.
Strategic, yes,
Yeah.
but also reciprocal and gradual. It's earned.
How do we practice that? How do we build that trust and share appropriately?
The research uses a really great analogy, the marble jar. Think of trust like a jar, and every time someone shows up for you, keeps a confidence, remembers something important, listens without judgment, they earn a marble in your jar.
Okay.
Healthy vulnerability is sharing parts of yourself one marble at a time. You start small with someone who's shown they're trustworthy. You see how they handle that small piece of vulnerability. Do they honor it? Do they reciprocate?
Save the bigger stuff.
You save your deepest, most intimate stories and struggles for your inner circle. For the people whose marble jars are full, the ones who've consistently proven they'll hold your story with care and respect. Vulnerability without discernment isn't brave. It's potentially reckless. Being brave enough to show up requires knowing who you can trust.
That changes everything. It's not this big, scary, uncontrolled flood. It's a careful, mutual building of connection.
Exactly. It's about earning the right to hear someone's story and them earning the right to hear yours.
Okay. That leads us to the third myth, which really resonates in cultures that, glorify independence. The idea that we can or even should go it alone, pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
Ah, the rugged individualist myth. It's so ingrained, isn't it? But biologically, psychologically, we are fundamentally wired for connection. Trying to go it alone, especially when we're struggling, goes against our deepest survival instincts.
We needed the tribe to survive, historically.
Absolutely. Being part of a group meant safety. Being cast out meant danger. So our brains are wired to seek connection. Yet in modern society, we often see asking for help as a sign of weakness, a character flaw.
We're often much more willing to offer help than to ask for it. Why is asking so hard? Why does it feel so vulnerable?
Because asking for help forces us to admit two things we hate admitting: that we're not perfect and that we're struggling. It requires us to expose our neediness. And that opens us up to the risk of being rejected, judged, or maybe even pitied, which can feel worse. But here's the thing. Learning to ask for support clearly and appropriately is an essential life skill. It's actually a profound demonstration of daring greatly. It shows self-awareness knowing you need help, and immense courage in expressing that need. It acknowledges our interdependence.
So asking for help isn't weakness,
It's courage. It's trusting yourself enough to know your limits and trusting others enough to let them in. It reinforces that connection isn't a nice to have, it's fundamental.
Okay, so if we manage to bust these myths, embrace vulnerability as courage, the payoff, you said, is what the research calls wholehearted living. Let's unpack that. What does it mean to live wholeheartedly?
At its core, wholehearted living means engaging with our lives from a place of worthiness. It's rooted in this incredibly powerful, yet often elusive, belief: I am enough.
I am enough. Simple words, but hard to truly feel sometimes.
Incredibly hard, especially in a culture that constantly tells us we're not enough unless we achieve X, Y, or Z. But it's crucial to understand what wholehearted living isn't. It's not about having a perfect life.
It's not about avoiding struggle.
Definitely not. The research is really clear on this. People living wholeheartedly experience the same hardships as everyone else: trauma, illness, job loss, divorce, money worries. The same stuff life throws at all of us.
So what's the difference then, if it's not the circumstances?
It's their internal operating system. It's how they navigate those struggles. They've cultivated specific practices, conscious choices, daily habits, ways of thinking and behaving that allow them to hold on to that core belief of worthiness, even when things are falling apart.
Practices like what? Can you give some examples?
Things like cultivating gratitude, practicing self-compassion instead of self-criticism, setting boundaries, seeking connection, embracing rest and play, letting go of perfectionism. These aren't grand gestures. They're often small, consistent choices.
So they have an internal anchor. Their worth isn't constantly fluctuating based on external results.
Exactly. Their validation comes from within. They can feel the pain, the disappointment, the fear. They don't bypass those difficult emotions, but they refuse to let those experiences define their fundamental worth. They have this underlying belief, okay, this is hard, this hurts, but I am still worthy of love and belonging. I am enough to handle this.
And that sense of worthiness seems deeply tied to our need for connection and belonging, right? The research calls these irreducible needs, not just wants, but needs.
Absolutely fundamental. We need to grasp just how primal this is. Our evolutionary history hardwired us to need acceptance. Being part of a group, being accepted, was literally necessary for survival.
Safety in numbers.
Right. So disconnection, exclusion, being rejected, our brains process that as a profound threat, an existential threat. That's why feeling like you're not enough can trigger such a deep, almost physical pain. It taps into that ancient fear of being cast out, which historically could mean death.
Wow, that explains why shame feels so devastating. It's not just embarrassment, it hits that core survival nerve.
Precisely. It's a threat to our sense of safety and belonging in the world.
Okay, understanding that primal need really highlights the difference between fitting in and truly belonging. A lot of people seem to mix those up.
Oh, hugely. And it's one of the biggest barriers to wholeheartedness. People spend so much energy trying to fit in, thinking that's the path to belonging.
That's the difference.
Fitting in is essentially about changing who you are to be accepted. It's assessing a situation or a group and thinking, who do I need to be? What do I need to say or do to be liked here? It's about conforming, people-pleasing, wearing masks.
And the cost of that.
The cost is enormous. You're constantly editing yourself, silencing parts of your true self. You might gain acceptance, sure, but it's conditional acceptance based on the mask you're wearing. You never feel truly seen or known, so you never truly belong. It's exhausting and breeds resentment.
Whereas true belonging.
Belonging is the opposite. It doesn't require you to change who you are. It requires you to be who you are. It's about showing up authentically with your imperfections, your quirks, your real opinions, and finding connection with people who accept you because of who you are, not in spite of it.
Even if being authentic means some people won't like you.
Especially then. Belonging is about finding your people, the ones who resonate with your true self. It doesn't mean being universally liked. It means having the courage to be yourself and trusting that you'll find connections that are genuine. The energy drain of fitting in disappears because you stop performing.
That takes bravery, though, just showing up as you are.
It takes immense bravery, which connects to another key insight. What we know matters, but who we are matters more. Being rather than knowing requires showing up and letting ourselves be seen.
That's a tough one in our world, isn't it? We're so often valued for what we know, what we can do, our expertise, our performance.
Exactly. We're rewarded for flawless execution, for having the answers. How do we shift from proving our worth through knowing and doing to grounding it in just being?
How do we make that shift?
It comes back to internal clarity about your values and your worth. If your self-worth is tied solely to your performance, how smart you seem, how much you achieve, then any mistake, any criticism feels like a fundamental threat to your identity. You're constantly striving, constantly anxious.
But if your worth is anchored deeper,
If you anchor your worth in who you are, your inherent value, your integrity, your compassion, your resilience, then you can still strive for excellence, absolutely. But the outcome doesn't define you. A failure is an event, not an identity. The bravery is in showing up authentically, willing to be seen, knowing that some might not like it, but trusting that your self-acceptance is the only anchor you truly need.
Okay, so the goal is this wholehearted living, rooted in worthiness and authentic belonging. But standing in the way is this cultural pressure cooker you mentioned earlier, the culture of scarcity.
Yes, the never enough culture. It's the air we breathe almost.
Let's break that down. What does that scarcity mindset really look like?
It's this pervasive underlying feeling or belief that there's simply never enough. Never enough time, never enough money, never enough sleep, never enough success, love, recognition, you name it.
It starts the moment you wake up, doesn't it? Didn't get enough sleep. Don't have enough time for.
Exactly. It often begins with not enough sleep and spirals from there. I'm not doing enough, I don't have enough, I'm not fit enough, successful enough, popular enough. It's this constant comparison against some unattainable ideal, fueled by fear. Fear of lack, fear of missing out, fear of falling behind.
And this isn't just personal anxiety, right? It impacts organizations, workplaces.
Massively. When a workplace culture operates from scarcity, fear of competition, fear of failure, focus only on bottom-line results, it breeds anxiety, burnout, micromanagement, and blame. People become afraid to take risks.
Because risk means potential failure, and failure in a scarcity culture means...
This often means shame, blame, or even losing your job. So creativity and innovation just dry up. People play it safe. They protect themselves. They don't offer new ideas. Connection suffers because everyone's competing or covering their backs. Engagement plummets.
So what are the pillars holding up this never-enough structure? The research points to three main components, right? Shame being the first.
Shame is the bedrock, the enforcement mechanism of scarcity. It's that deep, painful fear of being ridiculed, pointed out, put down, found wanting. When a culture, whether it's a family, a team, a society, uses shame, either overtly through harsh criticism or subtly through things like gossip or passive aggression, it shuts people down instantly.
It creates psychological danger.
Exactly. The message is, don't mess up, don't be different, don't be vulnerable, or you will be exposed as unworthy. So shame keeps people small, compliant, and afraid to step out of line.
Okay, shame is the foundation. The second component is comparison.
Comparison is how scarcity spreads the misery around. It's this constant measuring of ourselves against others or against narrow, often unrealistic ideals. We compare our messy, behind-the-scenes reality with someone else's curated highlight reel.
Especially easy now with social media.
Oh, absolutely. Social media supercharges comparison. But it happens everywhere. In organizations, people are ranked and pitted against each other based on narrow metrics, rather than valued for their unique strengths and contributions. This constant ranking fuels inadequacy, jealousy, and internal competition, even among people who are objectively successful.
The focus shifts from how can we collaborate to how do I beat them?
Precisely. It erodes trust and connection.
And the natural outcome of a culture steeped in shame and comparison is the third component, disengagement.
Disengagement is the logical consequence. When people feel unsafe, constantly judged, and perpetually less than, why would they invest their full selves? They shut down. They withdraw. They stop sharing ideas, stop offering discretionary effort, stop paying close attention.
Like quiet quitting.
That's one manifestation. Or just going through the motions, doing the bare minimum to avoid negative attention. It's a self-protective mechanism. Why be vulnerable? Why risk contributing if the potential downside is shame or punishment? Disengagement is the armor people wear when they believe they're not enough and fear being exposed.
So faced with this pervasive culture of scarcity, shame, comparison, disengagement, how do we fight back? It seems overwhelming.
It can feel overwhelming. But the antidote starts from within. It requires actively cultivating that sense of worthiness we talked about, that core belief, I am enough.
That belief becomes the shield.
It becomes the foundation from which you can push back. It gives you the internal strength, the resilience to recognize the never enough messages for what they are, cultural noise, not truth. And it gives you the courage to say enough. Enough comparison, and chasing external validation, enough overcommitment. It allows you to set boundaries.
Is it an internal shift first, leading to external boundary setting?
Yes, but it also requires courage in our interactions. The wider culture constantly pushes scarcity. Our job, our opportunity is to consciously push back and try to reshape the smaller cultures we have, influence over our families, our teams, our friendships.
How do we do that?
By actively choosing and modeling something different. Prioritizing connection over competition, valuing vulnerability over pretending, celebrating effort and learning, not just outcomes, choosing self-compassion over relentless perfectionism. Every time we make one of those choices, we chip away at the scarcity culture around us.
Taking a stand for value, vulnerability, and connection.
That's the work. It requires ongoing courage.
Okay, let's dive deeper into shame itself. You said it's the foundation of scarcity, and we need to differentiate it very clearly from guilt. Why is that distinction so critical?
It's arguably one of the most important psychological distinctions in this whole body of work. because one of these emotions can actually be helpful while the other is incredibly destructive.
So guilt versus shame. Let's nail down the difference.
Okay, guilt is adaptive. It focuses on behavior. Guilt says, I did something bad, or I made a mistake. Because it's focused on the action, it often motivates us to apologize, make amends, learn, and change our behavior. It's uncomfortable, yes, but it can lead to positive change.
Right. I feel bad about what I said.
Exactly. Now, shame is entirely different. Shame isn't about behavior, it's about self-worth. Shame says, I am bad, or I am wrong, I am flawed, I am unworthy. It's this intensely painful feeling or belief that we are fundamentally defective and therefore unworthy of love, belonging, and connection.
So guilt is, I did bad. Shame is, I am bad.
That's the simplest way to put it. And it's a crucial difference because shame doesn't lead to positive change. It leads to feeling trapped, powerless, and small.
And you mentioned earlier shame is universal. It's not just something certain people feel.
Absolutely universal. The research is clear. The only people who don't experience shame are those who lack the capacity for empathy and connection, essentially sociopaths. For everyone else, shame is a core human emotion. We all feel it. The difference lies in how we recognize it and how resilient we are to it.
You also said it triggers a threat response, fight, flight, or freeze. Can you elaborate on that? How does that play out when we feel shame, say, at work or in a relationship?
Yeah, because shame hits that primal need for belonging. The brain interprets it as a serious threat to our social survival. So the amygdala lights up, the stress hormones flood in, and we go into survival mode.
Fight, flight, freeze.
Exactly. Fight might look like getting defensive, blaming others, lashing out, trying to regain power by criticizing back. Flight could be withdrawing, avoiding eye contact, shutting down the conversation, physically leaving or trying to disappear. And freeze often shows up as feeling paralyzed, unable to think clearly, going blank, maybe agreeing to things you don't mean just to make the feeling stop.
And the result is?
The result is that shame keeps us stuck. It keeps us small, hidden, often resentful, and deeply afraid of being vulnerable again because the pain of that potential rejection feels unbearable.
Okay, so if shame is universal and so damaging, we can't eliminate it, but we can build resilience to it. How does that work? You mentioned a paradox that shame grows in darkness.
That's the key paradox. Shame derives its power from being unspoken. It loves silence, secrecy, and judgment. The moment you start to talk about it, to bring it into the light with someone trustworthy, it starts to wither. Empathy is the antidote.
So speaking, it diminishes its power. How do we build that resilience systematically? There are 4 steps, right?
Yes, 4 steps to developing shame resilience. It's a practice, not a quick fix.
Let's walk through them. Step 1.
Step 1. Recognize shame and understand its triggers. This is about developing awareness. How does shame feel in your body? Do you get hot? Does your heart race? Do you feel a knot in your stomach? A shrinking sensation? You need to learn your personal physical and emotional cues, your shame screen, so you can identify when shame is showing up. And also, what situations or comments typically trigger it for you.
Knowing the signs. Okay. Step 2.
Step 2. Practice critical awareness. Once you recognize shame, you need to reality check the messages it's screaming at you. Shame often hooks into unrealistic expectations about perfection, productivity, appearance, parenting, whatever. Critical awareness means stepping back and asking, is this expectation realistic? Whose expectation is it? Really mine or society's or my family's? You challenge the often irrational shame-based narrative. Am I really a terrible person because I made that mistake?
Deconstructing the shame message. Step 3 sounds like the bravest one, reaching out.
Step 3. Reach out and share your story. This is crucial. Shame needs secrecy to survive. When you share your experience, I'm feeling ashamed about X, or this situation made me feel really small, with someone you trust, someone who has earned the right to hear it, remember the marble jar, you invite empathy. Empathy is like water on the wicked witch of shame. It dissolves it. Hearing me too, or I felt that way, normalizes the experience and reinforces connection.
Sharing with the right people. Got it. And step 4.
Step 4. Speak shame. This is about naming the emotion itself, using the word, I feel ashamed, or this is bringing up a lot of shame for me. There's immense power in naming it. It separates the feeling from your identity. You feel shame. You're not shame. Owning the feeling rather than letting it own you is the final step in building resilience. It allows you to move from I am bad back to the more manageable, okay, I did something I regret, or I'm struggling with this situation.
Recognize, reality check, reach out, speak shame. That's a powerful framework.
It takes practice, but it works.
Let's think about a specific context where vulnerability and shame often collide. Creative work. Sharing anything we create, art, writing, a business idea, even how we raise our kids feels incredibly vulnerable.
It's a huge vulnerability arena, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because when we put our creations, our art out into the world, we're essentially saying, here's a piece of me. What do you think? We're asking to be seen, and we often tie our self-worth directly to the reception.
So if people love it, we feel amazing. If they criticize,
It can feel like a rejection of us, not just the work. And here's a tricky part. Relying too heavily on positive feedback is also dangerous. If your entire sense of self-worth gets inflated because people loved your presentation or your painting, you've just handed shame the keys to your life.
because the next time, the feedback might not be so good.
Exactly. Praise and criticism are two sides of the same coin if your worth is externally defined. True resilience, especially for creatives or anyone putting work into the world, comes from decoupling your self-worth from the outcome or the reception. Knowing that you are more than your product, your performance, your reviews, you can accept feedback, learn from criticism, even appreciate praise without letting it define your fundamental value.
The work can be flawed, but I am still worthy.
That's the wholehearted stance.
Okay. So because vulnerability feels risky and shame feels awful, we naturally develop ways to protect ourselves. We build emotional armor.
We do. We construct these defenses, these armories, to shield ourselves from hurt, judgment, and inadequacy. They feel safe in the moment, but the long-term cost is high. They often wall us off from connection, joy, and growth.
Let's dismantle some of that common armor. The first big one is perfectionism.
Oh, perfectionism. It's so often worn as a badge of honor, isn't it? People think it's about striving for excellence, having high standards.
But it's not.
It's really not.
Yeah.
Healthy striving is internally motivated, wanting to do your best, learn, grow. Feels energizing. Perfectionism is different. It's externally driven, usually by fear. It's the belief that if I can look perfect, act perfect, and do everything perfectly, then maybe, just maybe, I can avoid or minimize the pain of blame, judgment, and shame.
So it's a shield, a heavy 20-ton shield, as the research calls it.
Exactly. It's not about achieving excellence. It's about avoiding failure and criticism. It's saying, if I'm perfect, I can't be hurt.
And the cost of carrying that shield?
It's immense. Anxiety, burnout, depression. It leads to procrastination because the fear of not doing it perfectly is paralyzing. It can damage relationships because perfectionists can be highly critical of others too. In leadership, it leads to micromanagement and stifles creativity because people are afraid to make mistakes. And of course, it's based on an illusion. Perfection is unattainable, so you're always falling short, always feeling inadequate.
So what's the antidote? If perfectionism is the shield, how do we put it down?
The primary antidote is self-compassion. Learning to treat ourselves with the same kindness, care, and understanding we would offer a good friend who was struggling or failed at something.
Easier said than done sometimes. What does self-compassion actually involve?
It has three core components. First, self-kindness. Being gentle and understanding with ourselves rather than harshly critical or judgmental when we suffer or feel inadequate. Second, common humanity. Recognizing that suffering, failure, and imperfection are part of the shared human experience. We're not alone in our struggles. Everyone goes through this stuff. That perspective fights the isolation that shame creates.
Okay, self-kindness, common humanity. And the third?
Mindfulness. This means holding our painful thoughts and feelings in balanced awareness, without suppressing them, but also without exaggerating them, observing them without judgment. So when that perfectionist voice starts yelling, self-compassion allows you to say, okay, I hear that critical voice, I know I made a mistake and it feels bad, but making mistakes is human. I can learn from this and I don't need to beat myself up.
Trading the shield for kindness. Okay, armor piece number 2. Numbing.
Numbing is another major defense mechanism. It's basically any activity we use to try and dull or avoid difficult emotions. Anxiety, disappointment, shame, fear, vulnerability itself.
And this isn't just about the obvious things like drugs or alcohol, right?
No, those are definitely forms of numbing. But the research points to much more common, subtle, and socially acceptable ways we numb out. Things like excessive busyness, keeping ourselves frantic so we don't have time to feel.
Yeah.
Overworking, overeating, overshopping, endless scrolling on social media or news sites, binge watching TV. Even things like excessive worrying or living in fantasy, like constantly managing a fantasy football team.
Shadow comforts, they're called.
Exactly. They provide a temporary escape, a moment of relief from the discomfort, but they cast long shadows because they prevent us from actually feeling, processing, and dealing with what's really going on. They keep us from being present in our own lives.
And the danger is you can't selectively numb, can you, if you numb the bad feelings?
You inevitably numb the good ones too. You can't dull anxiety and pain without also dulling joy, connection, gratitude, and creativity. It's like turning down the volume on your entire emotional life. Everything becomes muted, gray.
So how do we resist that urge to check out, to numb when things feel hard?
It takes conscious effort. First, it's about learning to feel your feelings, developing emotional literacy. When discomfort arises, instead of immediately reaching for your numbing agent of choice, try to just sit with it for a moment. Name it. Okay, this is anxiety. This is disappointment. Allow yourself to feel it without judgment, knowing it will pass.
Leaning into the discomfort.
Leaning in, yes. Recognizing that difficult emotions are temporary messengers, not permanent states. Second, become mindful of your go-to numbing behaviors. Notice when you're reaching for your phone, the fridge, the remote, or your work emails because you're trying to avoid a feeling. Awareness is key.
And proactively.
Proactively, it often involves reducing the underlying anxiety that drives the need to numb. This means things like aligning your life more closely with your values, practicing saying no, setting boundaries to avoid overwhelm, and cultivating practices like mindfulness or gratitude that ground you in the present. Building that I am enough muscle helps you tolerate discomfort better.
Okay. The third piece of armor is really interesting. Foreboding joy. What is that?
Foreboding joy is one of the most subtle but powerful forms of emotional armor. It happens when things are actually going well. You feel intense joy, happiness, gratitude, love, and almost immediately this sense of dread washes over you.
Like waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Exactly. You start thinking, this is too good to be true, it can't last. You might start picturing worst-case scenarios. Yeah. Holding your beautiful, healthy baby and suddenly imagining a terrible accident. Celebrating a success and instantly worrying about the next failure. It's like we're rehearsing tragedy and moments of joy.
Why do we do that? It seems masochistic.
It's an attempt to protect ourselves. The thinking, often unconscious, is that if we anticipate disaster, if we don't let ourselves feel the joy too fully, then maybe the eventual loss or disappointment won't hurt as much. We're trying to soften the blow by preemptively feeling the pain.
Trying to control the uncontrollable future again.
Precisely. And the terrible cost is that it steals the present joy. We miss out on fully experiencing the good moments because we're too busy worrying about them ending. We trade happiness now for dress rehearsing future pain.
So what's the antidote to foreboding joy? How do we stay present with happiness?
The primary antidote is gratitude. Consciously practicing gratitude in those moments of joy anchors you in the present. Instead of letting your mind spin out into what if, you actively focus on appreciating what you have right here, right now.
So when that feeling of dread comes up during a happy moment,
you stop, take a breath, and consciously shift your focus to gratitude. Wow, I feel so happy right now. I'm so grateful for this moment, for this person, for this feeling. It doesn't mean pretending bad things won't happen, but it means refusing to let the fear of future pain sabotage present joy. It builds resilience by allowing us to fully soak in the good stuff.
putting down the armor, perfectionism, numbing, foreboding joy, and choosing self-compassion, feeling our feelings, and practicing gratitude instead. That sounds like the path.
It's a huge part of the path to wholeheartedness.
Which brings us to the big call to action, the phrase that titles the work we're exploring, daring greatly. This comes from that famous Theodore Roosevelt speech, doesn't it?
Yes, the Man in the Arena speech from 1910. Such a powerful articulation of this whole philosophy.
Can you remind us of the core message? What does it mean to dare greatly?
Roosevelt says, the credit doesn't belong to the critic, the person pointing fingers from the sidelines. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly.
Wow. So it's about choosing to be in the fight, basically. Choosing to participate, even knowing you might fail, might get hurt.
That's exactly it. It's about choosing vulnerability, choosing courage over comfort. It's about refusing to be one of those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat because they never risked anything. Specifically, it's about consciously choosing not to be the critic in the stands.
The person who judges and critiques, but never actually enters the arena themselves.
Right. The person who feels entitled to tear down others' efforts without ever having put their own skin in the game. Daring greatly means accepting that effort involves error, that showing up means risking failure. If you're not failing sometimes, you're probably not daring enough.
Okay, but once you step into that arena, you are going to face criticism. Some of it might be valid feedback we need for growth, but some might just be negativity from those critics in the stands. How do we tell the difference? How do we handle feedback without letting it derail us?
That's a critical skill discernment.
Hmm.
You can't just shut out all feedback because accountability is part of wholehearted living. But you also can't let mean-spirited attacks or uninformed opinions define you.
So how do we filter?
First, you need clarity on whose opinions actually matter. Who is in the arena with you, or at least understands the arena? Whose feedback comes from a place of wanting you to grow versus just wanting to tear you down? Build that small list of trusted people, your marble jar folks, whose feedback you'll truly take to heart.
And for feedback from others, or even from those trusted few, there's a model for how it should be delivered, right? Engaged feedback.
Yes, there's a framework for giving and receiving feedback in a way that fosters connection and growth, rather than shame and defensiveness. It completely changes the dynamic.
What does that look like?
Well, first, the person giving feedback needs to be willing to sit next to you, metaphorically speaking, not stand across from you like an interrogator.
Side by side, not face-to-face confrontation.
Exactly. And they need to put the problem in front of both of you, like something you can look at together, rather than making you the problem. It shifts from blame to collaborative problem solving.
What else?
They need to be ready to listen, ask questions, and accept they might not fully understand your perspective. They should hold you accountable without shaming or blaming, focusing on behavior, not character. Crucially, they should acknowledge your strengths and thank you for your efforts before diving into the critique.
Starting with the positive.
Yes. And modeling the vulnerability they expect. Are they willing to admit their part? Own their limitations? If someone isn't willing to engage with that level of empathy and vulnerability themselves, their feedback probably belongs in the cheap seats category.
That really reframes feedback as a vulnerable mutual process, not just a critique.
It has to be, if it's going to be constructive rather than destructive.
Okay, so daring greatly means stepping into the arena, discerning feedback. And ultimately, it comes down to asking ourselves a fundamental question, doesn't it?
Yes. The question that synthesizes all of this is, what's worth doing, even if I fail?
What endeavor, what relationship, what commitment is so important to you, so aligned with your values, that you're willing to risk the uncertainty, the potential failure, the emotional exposure, just for the sake of trying?
Exactly. It shifts the focus from guaranteeing success, which is impossible, to valuing the effort, the striving, the willingness to show up for something that matters. It embraces Roosevelt's point. There's no effort without error and shortcoming.
And this connects back to the marble jar idea too, right? In terms of how we handle failure, our own or others.
Absolutely. If you're daring greatly, you will make mistakes. Others in your life will too. The marble jar reminds us that relationships and efforts aren't usually all or nothing. A mistake, a failure, might mean a marble gets taken out of the jar. It requires discussion, maybe amends, but it doesn't necessarily mean the whole jar gets smashed.
Avoiding that black and white thinking.
Right. We need a more gradual, realistic approach. We can acknowledge shortcomings, learn, rebuild trust, and keep striving. Keep showing up, even with dust and sweat on our faces.
Okay, let's bring these powerful ideas into specific contexts. How does embracing vulnerability and daring greatly apply to leadership and organizational culture? We talked about scarcity culture being toxic.
Right. Scarcity cultures and organizations breed fear, blame, gossip, cover-ups, and kill creativity and engagement. To shift towards a more wholehearted, courageous culture, leaders need to make some fundamental changes.
Starting with themselves.
Absolutely. It starts with modeling. Leaders have to be willing to take off their own armor. They need to be transparent about challenges, admit when they've made mistakes, be willing to say, I don't know, but let's figure it out. When a leader models vulnerability, it creates psychological safety. It signals that it's okay for others to be real too.
That takes courage from the leader.
Immense courage. The second key shift is closing the disengagement divide. This is about integrity. It's the gap between what an organization says it values, the aspirational values, often on posters, and the values that are actually practiced and rewarded.
Like saying you value innovation, but punishing the first failure.
Exactly. Or saying you value work-life balance, but promoting the person who works 80 hours a week. If the practice values don't align with the aspirational ones, people see the hypocrisy and disengage. Leaders must ensure policies, rewards, promotion, the whole system genuinely reflect the values they claim to hold.
Walking the talk.
It's about operationalizing values. And the third piece is actively working to rehumanize work.
What does that mean in practice?
It means recognizing that employees are whole human beings, not just units of productivity. Performance models focus solely on outcomes without regard for well-being, inevitably lead to burnout, fear, and treating people like resources to be used up. Rehumanizing work means centering empathy, connection, and psychological safety. It means creating environments where people feel seen, heard, valued, and supported as humans first.
And paradoxically, that human-centered approach leads to better performance.
Consistently. When people feel safe, trusted, and connected, they bring their best selves to work. Creativity, collaboration, and engagement flourish. Vulnerable leadership isn't soft, it's smart, and it's effective.
Okay, let's shift to the other critical context. Parenting. How do these principles apply at home? The research says kids learn more from who we are than what we say, right?
That's the absolute foundation. Modeling authenticity is paramount. Our children are constantly observing us. If we want them to be comfortable with their own imperfections and emotions, we have to be willing to show ours.
Not in a scary, overwhelming way, presumably.
No, definitely not. It's about regulated honesty. Admitting when we've made a mistake and apologizing sincerely. Talking about our feelings in an age-appropriate way. Mommy's feeling a bit frustrated right now. I need a minute. Showing them that it's okay to struggle, okay to not be perfect, okay to ask for help. That creates a safe space for them to be authentic too.
What about equipping them for the struggles they'll inevitably face?
That's where teaching hope comes in. And hope, in this context, isn't just wishful thinking. It's a specific learned cognitive process.
What does it involve?
It involves three things. The ability to set realistic goals. The ability to figure out pathways to reach those goals, even if it takes multiple tries. And belief in one's own agency, the belief that I can do this.
And how do we teach that?
We teach it by letting them struggle appropriately, not rescuing them instantly, but supporting them in finding their own solutions, focusing on effort and pathways when they fail, not just on the outcome or their innate ability, helping them break down challenges. Hope is built through perseverance and experiencing mastery after effort.
That seems like a powerful antidote to entitlement, too.
It is. And another key practice is gratitude. Regularly incorporating gratitude into family life, talking about things you're thankful for, writing thank you notes, appreciating simple moments builds emotional resilience. It shifts focus from what's lacking, scarcity, to what's present, abundance, fostering contentment and connection.
And finally, steering clear of perfectionism in parenting.
Oh, this is huge. We have to actively avoid perfectionism, both demanding it from our kids and modeling it ourselves. That means decoupling their worth and our own parental worth from their achievements, grades, sports, popularity. Instead, we foster healthy striving, which is about aiming to be your best self based on your own internal standards of effort, learning, and integrity.
Celebrating effort over outcome.
Exactly. And letting them see us embrace our own imperfections. When we model self-acceptance, we give them the greatest gift. Permission to be human, permission to be wholehearted.
Wow. Okay, this has been an incredibly rich deep dive. We've journeyed from understanding vulnerability as courage, not weakness,
Right, as the core of uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure.
to recognizing the grip of scarcity culture and the power of cultivating worthiness, that feeling of I am enough.
In distinguishing destructive shame from adaptive guilt and building shame resilience.
Dismantling our emotional armor like perfectionism and numbing.
And answering the call to dare greatly, to step into the arena, even with the risk of failure.
It really comes down to that internal belief, doesn't it? That I am enough unlocks the door to living, leading, and parenting more wholeheartedly.
It truly does. That internal shift is what gives us the courage to be seen, to connect, to risk. It allows us to show up even when it's hard.
So the choice to dare greatly, it's not a one-time decision, it's a practice.
It starts today. It starts now. Maybe a final thought for you listening is to consider that gap, the space between your highest aspirations, the values you truly want to live by, and your current day-to-day practices.
Where are we falling short of our own ideals?
Yeah, and then ask, what's one small thing, one single action you could take this week to courageously close that gap just a little bit, to make your vulnerability, your values, more visible in a relationship, at work, or just in how you treat yourself?
That first step requires vulnerability.
It does, but it's also the step towards deeper connection, greater courage, and a more wholehearted life. It's the only way forward, really.
This was it on today's Book Guys. And guys, kindly subscribe and follow us for more such insights on various books. And also, do not forget to join our social media community to stay in touch and get updates.